Welcome to the JCT Business Studies webinar on preparing for CBA1 Business in Action and SLAR meeting. Throughout this webinar, we're going to look at the options for conducting your classroom-based assessment, Business in Action group project, and the various options open to you, as well as guiding you toward preparing for your subsequent Subject Learning and Assessment Review, or SLAR meeting. We would like to encourage your interaction, and we will be pausing at various points during and throughout this presentation to deal with any questions and queries that you may have this evening. It may be helpful for you to have to hand the NCCA's assessment guidelines from the beginning. This document can be downloaded at www.curriculumonline.ie. So let's begin. Our learning intentions for this webinar are to deepen our understanding of the changes to junior cycle assessment, to learn about some potential options available to teachers and students in conducting the first classroom-based assessment, or CBA, and finally, to develop our understanding of the Subject Learning and Assessment Review, or the SLAR process. The framework for junior cycle places the student at the centre of the learning process and envisages a modernised curriculum across all subjects. It allows for new ways of learning and a broader range of skills to be properly assessed. The dual approach to assessment provides a valuable opportunity to embed classroom-based assessment and formative assessment for learning, while recognising the role of external assessment. And so assessment is changing. In junior cycle business studies, the suite of assessment is made up of ongoing formative assessment as an integral part of the ongoing rich learning experiences, together with two classroom-based assessments, one in second year and one in third year. These classroom-based assessments, or CBAs, are complemented by the Subject Learning and Assessment Review meeting. The second CBA leads to the assessment task, which will be assessed and certified by the SEC, and together with the final state certified exam, will constitute the SEC awarded grade. The record of descriptors awarded by the teacher for each of the CBAs, together with the SEC awarded grade for the assessment task, combined with the final exam, will all be included in the Junior Cycle Profile of Achievement, or the JCPA. We will now look at the changes in assessment for Junior Cycle Business Studies. There are three separate assessment components. The first of these components are the classroom-based assessments, or CBAs. There will be one CBA in second year. This will be a group-based Business in Action project. The second of the CBAs will take place in third year and is an individual presentation project. The second assessment component is the assessment task, which will take place after CBA2 in third year. And the final assessment component is the final SEC assessment, which is the written exam, which students will sit in June of third year. Of course, it is important to point out that throughout the 3 years of study in junior cycle business studies, students should be engaged with ongoing formative assessment throughout. As we'll see with the business studies learning journey, over the course of 3 years of junior cycle business studies, students will engage in rich learning experiences across all three strands in each of the 3 years of study. This 3-year learning journey for students, which has various opportunities for students to check in. The first opportunity to check in is CBA1, which takes place in second year. The rich learning experiences continue in third year, and it is in third year that the next opportunity for checking in with CBA2 occurs. Students complete CBA2, and upon completion of this is the assessment task. And together, CBA1, CBA2, and the assessment task all lead towards the final written examination. And again, formative assessment forms an integral part of the student's learning journey throughout. The awards from all of these assessment components, along with the student's learning journey, will be formally recorded in the student's junior cycle profile of achievement, or JCPA. We will now pause for a moment to deal with some questions that may have occurred over the course of the last number of slides. And I'm going to pass over to Sinead Toohey to answer any questions that have emerged so far. Hi, Sinead.
Hi, David. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us here this evening. First of all, I suppose, David, there's questions coming, I think, that you will be dealing with later on.
Sure.
First of all, in relation to the dates for these assessment moments, and I suppose particularly there have been a number of questions as to whether that is actually set in stone or not. And I suppose what's very important is that those windows, as we call them, are actually prescribed by the NCCA. They're nationally mandated dates, and they're also available in the handout, which we have with our presentation here tonight for everybody who's attending, and indeed for those who might be viewing this afterwards. The second area that there have been a number of questions about is the whole aspect of the reporting at the end of it, particularly in terms of the JCPA, and in particular focusing on the assessment task and how much the assessment task is worth. So just to reiterate to people, the assessment task itself is worth 10%. It's part of the final report from the SEC itself. So when students receive their certificate of their examination results, their grade that they are awarded for junior cycle business studies will actually include the assessment task. So I think a couple of people have asked there to know, will the students get a separate award for that? And I know we'll be coming to it later, but they won't. As you said, it'll be a composite grade.
It should be amalgamated together.
And then there's a question which, again, I know we're going to be coming to, but I suppose we'll just clarify it now for people so it'll be clear in their minds going forward in terms of the reporting of the CBAs themselves, okay?
Sure, yeah.
And I know you'll be coming to that, but I suppose we will be talking about the fact that the CBAs will be reported to the students after they've done them. It'll be important that they also receive feedback. You talked there about the importance of formative assessment in the process. It'll be important that the students receive feedback from us as teachers to guide their learning and to move them forward on their learning journey, and also that it would be important that they're reported home to parents. And I know you'll be touching on it, but there is the possibility of them replacing the house exam. So the CBA, for example, CBA1 can be the summer house exam, and CBA2 can be the Christmas house exam in the third year. Okay, so that's generally, David, at the moment, and maybe we'll come back to some more questions shortly, if that's okay.
Okay, thanks, Sinead. And as Sinead mentioned, I know there are a number of questions which we will be dealing with during the presentation as a matter of course. But of course, we will be pausing at various intervals throughout this presentation to deal with any and all questions that may emerge as the presentation progresses. And so we'll continue. And let's look at the first of the classroom-based assessments, the Business in Action project. This is completed in second year over a 4-week period, beginning on the 12th of March and finishing by the 20th of April. That is the 2 weeks in advance of and the 2 weeks after the Easter break during this academic year. CBA1 is a Business in Action project. This means that it is in the area of either finance in action, enterprise in action, or economics in action. It is a group-based project with groups of between 3 and 5 students, and will be a research-based project of between 12 and 1,500 words. Following the conclusion of CBA1, the teacher, using the features of quality, will individually award each student within each group a descriptor, which describes the work completed by each student. All students in a class group should work on topics within the same Business in Action option, and it is recommended that subject departments choose the same option for all second year students. and this will be of real value when it comes to conducting the SLAR. Students will be engaged in 4 areas of activity during the course of their CBA. The 4 areas of activity are conducting research, evaluating their research, developing an action plan, and finally, compiling a report on their findings. The project will be submitted as a group, with each student also completing an individual student research template, as well as an individual student reflection template. Let us now look at the process of facilitating students to complete CBA 1. Well, the first step is to decide as a subject department which business and action option will be covered by the CBA. Then, supporting student groups in selecting a suitable topic within that option. It is essential that students are familiar with the features of quality that are to be used for the awarding and for awarding each student a descriptor. During the course of the 4-week period, students will complete their CBA project, with each member of the group engaging in each of the 4 areas of activity: conducting research, evaluating research, developing an action plan, and compiling their group report. Once the CBA has been completed, the classroom teacher will then award each individual student a descriptor based on applying the features of quality. This provisional descriptor will then be brought to the SLAR meeting to confirm that the features of quality have been aligned with the individual student's work appropriately. Upon completion of the SLAR, the students and their parents will then be informed as to which of the 4 descriptors the student has been awarded, along with feedback on the work that each student has submitted. Now let's walk through each of the 3 business and action options for CBA 1. We begin with enterprise and action. For this, students can develop a product or service. The product or service can be one that they devise or create themselves, which they identify as having a potential market, or one that already exists, which they identify as having the potential to expand its market. Or students can organize an enterprise event or activity, for profit or not for profit. It can be a once-off event or one that is organized over a longer period of time. It can be undertaken for economic, social, or cultural purposes. Some suggestions from teachers attending CPD include developing a product, suggesting changes to an existing product, developing a prototype, or indeed organizing an enterprise event. Over the course of the 4 weeks, students will carry out research in order to assess the feasibility of their idea. Students will evaluate their research findings. Both of these activities will be recorded and noted in the student's individual student research template. Students will then develop an action plan based on their research findings, which will describe elements of the marketing mix and financial information where possible. And where possible, students can provide their chosen product or service to their target market and record inputs and outputs. Compile a project to summarize the enterprise. Again, this project takes place over the course of 4 weeks, and as part of their project, with each student compiling and completing the overall group project included in its appendices from the individual student research template and the individual student reflection template. And that is an example or sample look at the enterprise in action option. For the economics in action option, students are given an opportunity to explore an economic trend, development, change, or policy that is impacting either positively or negatively on the Irish economy and or society. Suggestions for topics for the Economics CBA group project from teachers at our CPD events include economic issues such as the plastic bag tax, local impact of Brexit, a sugar tax, water charges, rates of unemployment, and our corporation tax. In conducting an Economics in Action project, students may be involved in the following activities. Carry out research on their chosen economic issue. Evaluate their research findings, which include identifying and assessing economic, social, and environmental benefits and costs. Again, these first two areas of activity will be recorded for evidence in each individual student's research template. Students will continue to demonstrate use of relevant economic indicators and graphic representations to support their research findings. Then, develop an action plan outlining an economic policy change that may seek to improve the resulting economic outcomes. Then finally, students will compile a report to summarise their work. Again, this all takes place over the course of a 4-week period. The group project report is submitted along with, for each individual student, the individual student research template and the individual student reflection template. So that was a look at the Economics in Action option. And now we'll have a look at a Finance in Action option. For students engaging in the Finance in Action option, they are given an opportunity to identify and to research a financial challenge for a consumer or for an organisation, either a profit or not-for-profit organisation. Some suggestions from teachers at our various CPD events include the impact on a family of a child starting college, a decision to have one parent stay at home, budgeting for a family holiday or a new car, or perhaps an organisation investing in their online presence. In completing a Finance in Action option, students will investigate and research a chosen financial challenge and then evaluate their research findings. Describe some causes for the challenge, identify costs for different stakeholders, and perhaps classify positive and negative impacts on income and expenditure. Following this, students will support their analysis with tabular and graphic representations. They will then develop an action plan to address the financial challenge based on their evaluation of the research findings before finally compiling a project to summarise their work. Here again, each individual student will make use of the individual student research template and the individual student reflection template. These templates are available as Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 of the NCCA's assessment guidelines. So that's a look at the 3 business in action options, and we'll pause now to deal with some questions. Sinead, a few questions are emerging from that?
Yes, certainly, David. A good few questions coming in, I suppose, as we start to discuss the options. I might go through them just, I've grouped them together as best I can, so we'll maybe take a look at them. I suppose, first of all, looking maybe a little bit at the nuts and bolts of the actual project itself. You mentioned the word count there, and we have to stick to that, and I suppose the answer would be no, you don't have to stick to it, it's there just as guidance.
But it's a good guide.
A good guide, and it'll depend on the topic chosen, it'll depend on obviously the amount and depth of the research that has been done, but it's a guide and more or less just to shape for the students, because
it helps give clear focus and shape and framing to what the project will be. That is not a thesis that we're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's important. We're talking about relevant to the age and stage of the student. The other query in relation to the project itself would be about the format of it. There's just, I suppose, a number of people asking there, is there a prescribed format? And I suppose there isn't, other than it should be in a written format. There's a wide range of options available to students. They could produce a sort of a report style presentation that might be stapled together or put in a folder. They could also have a poster style presentation in a booklet format. There's a number of different ways they could be presenting it. I suppose the important thing is that it's a written presentation, not an oral presentation, because that's CBA2. We have seen on our CPD day at the moment, where we're looking at a sample of CBA1, we've seen where students have put their information into a PowerPoint presentation and printed the slides.
Okay, so yes, and where they prepare their or compile the report in the form of a PowerPoint presentation, they simply hit print as opposed to present.
Exactly. Exactly, and that's probably maybe a good way, I think, for students maybe to structure their work in a neat fashion, because as we'll see in a few minutes, one of the features of quality actually applies to project presentation, so it is important. I suppose just picking up on that, and it overlaps with a few questions that are coming up later on about the templates and so on, but there will be samples of the classroom-based assessments available on Curriculum Online. Our colleagues in the NCCA are working on those at the moment, and it would be interesting, I think, to take a look at those. So we would recommend taking a look and keeping an eye on Curriculum Online to see some sample CBAs that have been done by students in classrooms who are following the new specification, and how they approach them, and I suppose the range of approaches that have been taken within the classroom-based assessment. So it's worth, I think, having Curriculum Online as a go-to website in terms of the CBA.
Yes, certainly, and if when they emerge as sampler work, they will be on curriculumonline.ie.
Yes. Yeah. So another aspect then that is right there is the time for this, David. Okay, and what's considered in terms of time. And I suppose it's everybody's first time approaching something like this. Everybody is concerned. Everybody wants to do their best by the students. So I guess first of all, it's really important to note that this is part of the 200 hours contact time for students in our classroom. It's been written in as part of the specification, so the time is already allowed for. That's an important point. It's not separate to class time. It's also intended that as much as is feasibly possible, the work would be done during class time. That's the time that's set aside for it.
Where practical. Yeah.
Exactly, and that students would be working and collaborating together. Now, obviously, as you said, where practical, because one of the 4 areas of activity is research. There may be an aspect of field research being conducted there.
It might not necessarily be possible to conduct during that 40-minute class on a Tuesday morning.
Exactly. So, as we would say, where feasibly possible, all the work should be within the class time, and it is part of the 200 hours. So we will be talking about across the 4 weeks, as you've been reiterating there, that the activity would be taking place, both the conducting of the research, evaluating, the developing of the action plan, and the actual finalising and printing of the project.
So those 4 areas of activity take place over the course of 4 weeks.
That's exactly it. And roughly that would equate, depending on how many contact periods you have, roughly about 8 hours. So again, looking at the output that we've been talking about, and there's maybe a little bit of concern about, the volume of that output, it would be relevant to 8 hours of work there is what we would be looking at from the students, right from the start through to the end.
Sure, okay. That makes sense, yeah.
A few people nervous about different aspects of the CBA, David. First of all, a little bit of, I suppose, concern or apprehension about the enterprise in action task.
Okay. And
I think particularly focusing in on the fact that there's concern that if I have a number of class groups and they're all running an enterprise, because we do have a great culture in our schools of mini companies and all the different variety of competitions, Student Enterprise Awards, Junior Achievement. We also have a lot of enterprise activity going on in senior cycle. So maybe there's a few pieces of concern coming through. There are questions about that.
Well, maybe it's worth reminding ourselves that this project, CBA1, is a research-based project as opposed to an event-based project.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So basically they're doing the research to develop an action plan, which is important, right? And they do not, as you said in the presentation, actually have to bring their enterprise to fruition. And indeed, when people see the examples on Curriculum Online, and people, when they join us for the CPD session, and we look at an example of a CBA, they'll see that we're actually looking at a prototype of a project or a product for the project. So therefore, students don't actually have to execute a product. It can be a prototype or an idea for a service or an idea for an event. It doesn't actually have to be executed.
Sure, but notwithstanding that, where possible,
exactly.
it would make
there is
sense.
Huge value, obviously, in executing and carrying it through, but it does not have to be done within the 4 weeks.
Sure. Okay.
Another area that's just a little bit concerning for people, I think, is one teacher has said here. I'm looking at economics in action, but I'm concerned, about the level for the students, because obviously the renewed focus on economics is quite new for us in junior cycle business. We have quite a significant focus on economics. And I suppose, again, we're talking relevant to the age and stage of the students. They're second year students. We're not talking about leaving certificate economics. We had some lovely suggestions there from our colleagues in the CPD sessions. And again, it could be something that's linked to something of local interest. We've often heard teachers talk about the fact that maybe from an agricultural background, there'd be a huge interest in the aspects of economics that focus on agriculture.
Or a particular one,
exactly. Or it's maybe something that's in the news. I mean, there's a lot of economic topics in the news on a daily basis, and I think students are becoming increasingly aware of those, through their interactions with the media and so on. So there may be something that's actually of particular interest to students as well.
Sure, but the main thinking there is that we need to keep this within the age and stage range for a second-year student at common level.
That's exactly it. And that actually brings us on to another area that we've had 2 or 3 questions on, is about the depth of the evaluation of the research, because we do talk about analysing and evaluating the research that the students generate through their individual research. And I suppose the best advice there would be that on pages 13 and 14 of the assessment guidelines, there are scaffolding prompts and questions that can be used to help the students with evaluating their research findings. And that will be the best to gauge the depth that would be intended. There's some excellent scaffolding prompts there in the assessment guidelines.
So certainly a useful resource is
definitely, I think assessment guidelines your first go-to document, definitely.
Absolutely.
All right, David.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Sinead. So, we'll continue on, and again, as questions emerge over the course of the presentation, we will take opportunities to check in and to deal with those questions. So, we'll continue on, and we'll look at how, as teachers, we need to be aware that we have a role to play in preparing students for engaging in the CBA process through developing skills in our classrooms before and during the CBA process. And these skills include researching, analysing and evaluating information, group work and working with others, completing project work, and of course, reflection. We should seek to build students' skills in these areas by developing teaching and learning strategies that focus on these skills. To help develop students' skills in the areas of group work and working with others, we can seek to integrate the building of these skills through project work in our classrooms. We also have a role to play in developing our students as reflective learners. And we can do this by fostering ongoing reflection as a central part of the student's rich learning experience. Now let us look at assessing CBA 1. Upon completion of CBA 1, teachers will then apply the features of quality, which, as we've just mentioned, can be found on the NCCA's guidelines for the classroom-based assessment and the assessment task booklet. Each individual student will be awarded either yet to meet expectations, in line with expectations, above expectations, or exceptional. These 4 descriptors are informed by 5 features of quality, which address areas such as the research method used and analysis of research, the evaluation of the research, the action plan developed, the project in its presentation form itself, and indeed the individual student reflection template. We should work our way through from the bottom at yet to meet expectations up through each of the 4 descriptors to arrive at the best fit descriptor that on balance reflects the student's work. A reminder that the NCCA's support document, titled The Guidelines for the Classroom-Based Assessment and the Assessment Task, is available to download at www.curriculumonline.ie. This document also contains, as its appendices, both the individual student research template and the individual student reflection template, which are to be used for the purposes of CBA 1. So let's rejoin Sinead and see have any questions emerged as a result of our look at that.
Yes, David, actually, just as you mentioned the templates there was a flurry, if I can use it, fit for the snow over the last few days, but quite a flurry of questions about where can I get access to those templates. So just to reiterate what you said there, the 2 templates are available in the assessment guidelines, which we've just mentioned is our go-to document.
Sure.
There are the 2 appendices in the assessment guidelines, and we also have them on our website available as printable sheets. You know, they're each are 2 pages each, so if you want to just access them to print them, they're also available on our website in the assessment section of our website. Well, if you're going to the assessment guidelines, there are pages 29 and 31 of the assessment guidelines. So I think those questions may have come in just before you actually mentioned the templates there, just in time, but just to reiterate, because they are 2 very important templates. And I know the teachers that have been using them are finding them very useful in terms of supporting the students and scaffolding both the research and the reflection.
Yes, and of course, when we talk about building skills and so on, it's certainly useful for teachers in developing project work and group work within their classrooms. Maybe use those templates or adapt those templates in preparation for when they will use them as part of CBA 1. That's exactly it. And actually, over the course of our webinar so far, that has been a common question as to how best can I prepare the students for the actual CBA. And what you've said there is exactly it, that it will be very important that students have opportunities to experience the skills that are being developed through the classroom-based assessment. In particular, in classroom-based assessment 1, we're looking at group work, obviously, because the students will be working in groups of 3 to 5, as you said earlier on, is the recommendation for it. So students will be working in groups, students will be doing research, and students will also be reflecting on what they have learned, from being part of a group almost as well. So it would be useful to be building those into teaching, assessment and learning as you go through your time with your students. Sure, so it's certainly true to say that when students arrive at CBA 1, that shouldn't be their first experience of group work and research and even the use of those research and reflection templates. Yes, that's exactly it. And just about the research, somebody asked there, was there any guidance in relation to the research? Obviously, students will be completing a wide range of research. There'll be both primary and secondary research being conducted. But I suppose one piece of advice I think that actually came in, not so much a question from people, but actually a comment there. Well, I suppose a question phrased as a comment to know, is it possible to use digital tools to conduct that research, particularly maybe some of the field research? And the answer is certainly yes, if students have access to those, something like Google Forms or SurveyMonkey or Microsoft Forms, or there's a wide range of tools that could be used. They could be very useful for students in conducting their research, and also maybe in conducting the research to the target audience that they're looking for, because sometimes they don't necessarily have direct access to that target audience, but can get it via some of those digital tools, all the time though being mindful of the acceptable usage policy that the school would have in relation to the use of the internet and technology. Just following up on the group aspect of it, David, people asking to know if there's any advice in relation to setting the groups. I think that's a common question we get asked also at CPD. Certainly. And I think, first of all, we don't have a policy on it or a line on it in terms of setting groups. We would certainly feel that it would be better if the groups are of a mixed ability variation in the classes, because it's very important that we do have that variation. But again, it will differ from class to class. You know, as we all know, you know, my classes will be different to your classes and so on. It's probably a discussion that teachers should have as a department in relation to it, to see, you know, what the thinking is in the department, and maybe to come up with a common
approach if that's possible, and so on. We wouldn't in JCT have direct guidance on that, but certainly, you know, all the education, educational research around this would talk about the importance of mixed ability, because students will have different strengths and will have different strengths that will shine at different places in this project. So it is important to give everybody an opportunity to shine. Just finally then, and maybe slightly linked to that, is, you know, there are some people here expressing a little bit of concern about students that might have particular needs or difficulties. And again, back to our go-to document, our assessment guidelines, pages 4 and 5 there, talk about the reasonable supports for students and special provisions for students that might need particular supports in order to do the best they possibly can with the classroom-based assessment. So again, pages 4 and 5 there of the assessment guidelines are your first point of call in relation to those. Okay,
so a thoroughly useful document for basically all of our go-to questions.
Exactly, yeah. Yes. So yeah, I certainly I think the assessment guidelines will clarify a lot for our people.
Yeah.
Okay, David, thanks very much.
Thanks very much, thank you. And so we'll continue on with our discussion, and upon completion of CBA 1, and following on from the provisional awarding of descriptors to each student's work, the Business Studies subject department will then convene a subject learning and assessment review. During the SLAR, teachers will share and discuss samples of their assessment of student work and build a common understanding about the quality of student learning. This SLAR meeting will take approximately 2 hours, with that time coming from the 22 hours of professional time. And you'll note from the handout section here that we have our suggestions as regards how to deal with and use those professional hours. The SLAR facilitator will be allocated 2 additional hours by school management to facilitate the preparation for and the coordination of each SLAR meeting. Teachers will share the role of the facilitator during SLAR meetings on a rotational basis, and where there is a single teacher of a subject in a school, that teacher can be facilitated to participate in a SLAR meeting with another school. A reminder that the focus and the agenda of a SLAR is such that teachers will share and discuss samples of their assessment of student work, and it is this that will help subject departments working together to build a common understanding about the quality of student learning. In addition to this, SLAR meetings will act to support professional collaboration through developing a collegial professional culture, affording opportunities to share teaching and learning strategies, and the SLAR will also improve feedback for students and help in building confidence about judgments. Once the SLAR meeting has concluded, we may need to revise our provisional descriptors that we have awarded. We should then report to students and their parents the final confirmed descriptor awarded. We also provide feedback to students on their work completed. At this point, too, the NCCA has available resources on conducting a SLAR, including a video recording during a SLAR meeting with an English subject department, which took place last year. This is particularly pertinent in highlighting the professional dialogue that can be facilitated through the SLAR process. And the link you can see is at the bottom of this slide. So, Sinead, any questions?
Yes, David, we still have questions coming in about the actual CBAs themselves. Okay. The majority of the questions coming in. I think we may have dealt with some of the issues already. Now, maybe people weren't with us, or maybe the question hadn't been posted, but I suppose it's important to say that for everybody that attended here tonight, we will be sending a composite list of questions and answers back, that, you know, because I know people can't actually see the questions, they can just hear the audio. So yes, we will be sending people just a brief summary of the questions and answers.
And of course, we'll be making this available for everybody as a video.
The recording will be available. So I suppose, just coming back to the topic of research, I think that's something that's gaining a lot of questions here in terms of, I suppose, the depth of the research, the range of sources, all those aspects to it. Do they have to research online is another aspect coming up. Different, I suppose, questions very much related and focusing on research. Again, we would point people to the research template in the assessment guidelines, which gives very good guidance, as do the assessment guidelines themselves in the piece about CBA1 in the assessment guidelines. But also just to say that as part of our current CPD day, we have a set of videos. They're made in Powtoon format, yep. And the videos are going to be available on our website by the end of the week. So for anybody that has been to CPD that wants to utilise the videos, or again, maybe people who have yet to receive their CPD day, those Powtoons will be available. They're very popular with teachers at the moment in terms of scaffolding and structuring the research process, in breaking it down and to make it more accessible to students. And as we were saying earlier on, it might be good if students had some experience of that research process before they come to actually do CBA1 in March of next year. And that can be something bite-sized that's built into our units of learning or our plan of units of learning for the next few months. But it might be a good idea and a good opportunity to give students an opportunity to experience that. Just coming back to the choice of the topics for the CBA, and I know we mentioned this, but just to reiterate, in my class, everybody is either doing enterprise in action, economics in action, or finance in action. I wouldn't have a group of students doing something economics related and a second group doing something finance related. My whole class will be doing one of the three options.
Sure, and the thinking there being that there are particular learning outcomes that we will need to have front-loaded before the CBA begins, and we're probably asking maybe too much of ourselves if we're looking to have different business and action projects happening within the one class.
That's exactly it, David. And I suppose to point out that for anyone that might be looking for a little bit of guidance around the planning of it, that on our website in the planning section, we do have some second and third year plans that are differentiated depending on whether you're looking at enterprise in action, finance in action, or economics in action. I suppose it would be important as a department that we might, if there's more than one teacher of second year business studies, that we'd have a discussion around, you know, the potential aspect of CBA1 that we're going to look at. It's not mandatory that two teachers would both choose economics in action or enterprise in action or finance in action. But as you mentioned earlier, it would certainly help the discussions at the SLAR meeting. And I think thinking about it, it would be lovely to have that collegial support as well, as we all embark on something that's quite new for us as business studies teachers. So maybe it's worth having a conversation about it, but it's not mandatory. If I really want to do finance and you really want to do enterprise, that's actually okay. The other question that arose there was, what happens, for example, if I have students in my class who want to look at the sugar tax and you have students in your second year class that want to look at the sugar tax, is that okay? And the answer is, yes, it is. They're in separate classes, but I suppose as teachers we'd also be encouraging, hopefully, that they might come up with a slightly different angle, or their research might differ, or in some way that, obviously, because they're in two different classes, their projects won't be identical and shouldn't be identical either, because students will be different and the angle that they'll take on it will be different.
Okay. Yeah,
is that okay, David?
That's very comprehensive. Then, yeah.
Okay, thanks, David.
Thank you. Okay, so in addition to the SLAR meetings, SLAR meetings will act to support professional collaboration through developing that collegial and professional culture, as we just mentioned. And with respect to that point, it would be certainly beneficial to subject departments to look at having a conversation around which business and action option perhaps all classes within the school may look at. So, in terms of online supports, the NCCA, as we've mentioned a couple of times today, has various resources available on conducting the SLAR, including that video recording in English. And they also have on their website invaluable information in terms of the exemplar work from junior cycle business studies, together with key documents, namely the business studies specification and the guidelines for the classroom-based assessment and the assessment task. There is lots of useful information, documentation and resources too available on the business studies section of the jct.ie website. The business studies page on the jct.ie website is regularly updated, and you will find that we have a number of areas that may be of interest to business studies teachers, including the key documents, planning, assessment, CPD materials, resources, news and updates, and lots more besides. We have recently published a number of key documents relating to the SLAR process, and these will be most beneficial in helping to prepare for our first SLAR, which will take place immediately after CBA 1. So now to revisit our learning intentions. Well, we had hoped to deepen our understanding of the changes in assessment. I think we have certainly looked at what the changes are going to be and recognise that there will indeed be significant change for teachers and for students. To learn about some potential options available to teachers and students in conducting the first CBA, and we've looked at the business and action options and looked at each of the three in a bit of detail, and to develop our understanding of the subject learning and assessment review process. Sinead, any final questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, just a couple there about the SLAR process, David. I suppose, again, something that's new. Classroom-based assessments are very new to us. The SLAR process is very new to us. A question about the time. Is it during the school day?
Sure.
Which I know you covered there, but just to reiterate, the time for the SLAR meeting will come from the professional time that we all have.
22 hours.
That 22 hours. So again, that's a discussion that will be had at school level as to when it will take place, but it will take place in the window, the week window that is allocated for it. And indeed, from our experience so far, it would be a good idea if teachers set the date for their SLAR meeting as soon as possible, because it really gives a focus for people and something to work towards in terms of it. In terms of the SLAR facilitation role itself, there is preparation time available for the SLAR facilitator.
Yes, that's 2 hours.
2 hours. And
that's in addition to the...
That's exactly it. That's the question that was being asked there. Is that part of or in addition to? And the answer is in addition to. And that's per SLAR meeting. So 2 hours for the SLAR meeting for CBA 1. And I know we didn't talk about CBA 2 tonight, but 2 hours for SLAR meeting for CBA 2 as well. Again, people asking any recommendations about should it be the subject department head or, you know, is there recommendations as to who should do it? And I mean, certainly the role is open to anybody within the business studies department. Again, something that we should collaborate and discuss collaboratively in order, you know, to find who would best suit the role in the first year.
Sure, but to point out that it does not necessarily have to be the subject department coordinator.
No, most certainly not. And again, just like best practice around the subject department coordinator would say, it would be important that the role would rotate, and it's intended that it rotates between teachers. And most definitely, David, I think it's not set in stone that it would be the subject department coordinator. Sure, yeah. Again, just following up on, we have a number of teachers with us tonight who are actually the only teacher of business studies in their school. It's been flagged here a couple of times on the questions. And what's their situation in relation to the SLAR? So I suppose, as we know, they have options available to them. First of all, we're looking at the situation where they might be the only teacher of second year business studies, but there may be another teacher teaching maybe first year or third year or whatever within the school. So they can choose to have their SLAR meeting with a colleague in the school, even though the colleague in the school might not have work to bring to the SLAR meeting.
Or might not currently be teaching second year business studies. Yeah?
But may in the future.
Very well be.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a great opportunity to share practice and share ideas. Or they can, if they wish, through their principal, make an arrangement to link with a local school and to attend the SLAR meeting in a local school, where again it would bring advantages to them in terms of the fact that, you know, they can maybe see work from other schools and get an opportunity to collaborate even beyond the walls of their own school. And just a question in then from one of our colleagues in Gael Colosha, who's asking about Trí Gaeilge and the possibility of a SLAR Trí Gaeilge. And it does say in the framework for junior cycle that that teachers from Gael Colosha can be facilitated in attending a SLAR meeting in another Irish medium school. And again, the first point of contact for that would be the principal to have those discussions. And I suppose just to say, in relation to the SLAR facilitation, David, we are in throes at the moment of planning SLAR facilitation workshops, which will be taking place after Christmas. Some of our colleagues here tonight may have had an opportunity to attend some of the workshops that were available for the management hours, which have just finished up. From the facilitator. That's exactly it. So there was a little bit of confusion on the question there tonight. So the SLAR facilitation workshops will be taking place after Christmas. They will be in the education centres and they will be available to teachers to register for. And there'll be more information about that coming shortly. So maybe keep an eye on our Twitter feed, keep an eye on our website and so on for further information about those SLAR workshops.
Okay.
So that's it, David.
That's great, very comprehensively dealt with. Thanks very much, Sinead. So we hope that this webinar has gone some way in further assisting you in preparing for the upcoming CBA1. We do hope that you found it to be both informing and engaging, and we thank you for your participation. We hope to have this webinar available as soon as possible on the business section of the JCT website, as soon as possible. And again, we would invite you to continually and regularly check in with us online for the most up-to-date information and resources. That's all from us for now. And on behalf of the whole Business Studies team, we would like to wish you all the best in your continued preparations for CBA1. Finally, please ensure that you join our mailing list if you haven't already done so, the link for which is on the Business Studies page of jct.ie's website. Many thanks and good evening.